really quick review of The Tick. I just watched the second half of the first season, and let's comment on that a bit. The Tick is a series that was created by, well, this version of the series. It's actually a comic book initially, then it was a cartoon, then it was a live-action TV show with Patrick Warburton as the Tick, and then more recently, Amazon had this thing going, Amazon Prime. They're trying to get into the next Netflix business of producing their own content. Some of which has been okay, some of which has been stupid, some of which has actually been pretty good, and this included. The new format, their kind of paradigm here, is that they had a bunch of pilots, and the premise was Amazon Prime subscribers could watch these pilots, comment on them, kind of do a survey. I did it myself. And if you like the show, and enough people like the show, they'd actually produce it as a series. They released this new Tick pilot in 2016, and it got good feedback. So in 2017, they actually released what actually turns out to be the first half of season 1, is what they're calling it. They're not calling this season 1 and season 2, despite the fact they're more than a year apart. Rather, they released 6 episodes last year, and then just Friday night, I'm laughing and I'll get to that. The Friday night they released what they're calling the second half of season 1. Once again, that's kind of odd because they're a year apart. It's a weird way of doing it, but I get the impression they intend to make a second season that's a full 12 episodes. The first half of first season last year was 6 episodes. Friday, just yesterday, just last night, they released, the 6 more episodes. So total of 12. And I have to comment, I did a review of this already. I did it when the pilot first came out way back when. I think I did a review of the actual series, the first 6 episodes, and then I want to comment on it today because it dropped Friday night at midnight. It's Saturday about noon. I've watched the entire series front to end twice now. It's really very, very good. It's shockingly good. I'm dumbfounded by this a little bit. To understand, if you're familiar with the comic book, just briefly the history of the Tick. In the original comic book, it was, it was a while back, but the premise was, here we have the Tick, who's this big blue guy. He's kind of a dummy, kind of a simpleton. If you're familiar with the Tick at all, he's pretty much the same as he was in the series in the cartoon. You get the idea. But in the original comic book, I think the first scene is like there's a mental institution or something. A shadowy figure breaks a hole in a wall, like Kool-Aid Man, escapes, and then like Beaker and what was his name, Professor Honeybunsen or something like that. Like those two guys who look like those Muppets comment on like, there goes a very disturbed individual, and that's the premise for the Tick. He's actually, I guess in comic book canon, he's an escaped mental patient about whom we know virtually nothing. Since then, his origins have been very vaguely defined. Like, I was talking to a friend who's a huge Tick fan last night, and she's like, I really don't want, I wanted to keep it vague. And I'm like, oh, okay, I could see that. Then was the cartoon. The cartoon was super popular. It was like a show with not adult humor, but adult-ish humor, more grown-up humor that you could watch with anyone. You could watch it with a little kid, you could watch it with your mom, and everyone could appreciate and enjoy it, and that's why it was super popular. It was very well loved. The Patrick Warburton series was short-lived. I think there were 2 seasons, but they were definitely not full seasons, if that. I think there was a spare episode thrown out here and there, like after the fact. It was a good show, but getting the Tick live action is tricky, to say the least. A lot of the characters in the show, in the comic book, let's start from there, don't translate well. They're kind of jokes and they're like turn of phrase. It's like a superhero parody, but weirder. It's kind of, what if you have a superhero parody, but you actually have not a realistic world, but realistic consequences, and that comes out to be very weird. Like, I believe at one point the Roman god of the aqueduct moves an entire body of water north of the city and essentially makes the city a coastal city, despite the fact that it's in the middle of like Omaha or something like that. It's someplace weird. Just weird stuff like that. The cartoon continued it with like the sewer urchin, like a character who lived in the sewers, but is actually a grand, epic, sweeping character in his underground domain. Just weird, just strange characters, and the ongoing joke was, what are the permutations of a superhero-like universe? And that's where its premise comes from. That's where its strike comes from. The live-action show proved that, I think, demonstrated the challenges of translating that to live action, simply because it's really hard to make that into a live action show. You have to kind of, having a comic book character or even a cartoon character say some of these lines or talk about this comic book stuff, it looks strange. So you're kind of forced by the format itself to be more, once again, I don't want to say realistic, but acknowledge realism exists, I guess. And I don't think the first live action show quite got it. Like, they were in very experimental territory, and I think they learned a lot. And I was shocked. And last night we were looking at the credits in between episodes, and I was like shocked, because it's like, holy crap, Patrick Warburton is the producer for this show, for the new show. The former Tick is actually the producer, and I was like, oh, well, that's really cool. And maybe that's why maybe that's one factor in why this one's so good. Is like, maybe Patrick Warburton has taken his experiences from the first series and like, okay, this was problematic, but this worked really well. Let's see what we can do. And I gotta say, god damn it, here's an odd impression though that I got from it. The first episode's a pilot. It's kind of, here's what we can do on the budget we've got, and this might not even make it to even a few episodes. Like, they might make a second episode, but maybe not. So they kind of, did what they could. It's a little weird, it's a little weak, and it doesn't quite have its feet under it. Same thing for the second episode, when they actually made that 2017, I guess. I think they used a lot of the footage from the pilot that didn't get used. Like, maybe they had extra footage or something like that, or sets. Then, so the first two episodes aren't bad. They're establishing, though. And they are sort of, that newborn calf, his legs are still a little wobbly. And then the third episode's good. It continues some themes that don't quite play out. This is spoiler-free, by the way. You want to see this. You want to see this, and you want to be surprised by it. So I'm not going to spoil a damn thing. So this will make this a little iffy, but we'll work with what we've got. So the third episode's good, but it's actually the fourth, fifth, and sixth where it's the strongest. Like, as it goes on, the first 6 episodes, as it continues, it gets much stronger. The first 2 are the weakest, but good. The third one's stronger. Things are getting better. 4, 5, 6, way better. Like, really engaging. Like, some of the lines in it just really won me over. Like, they're like, that's a cool idea. Like, treating the Tick's weird memory problems and his inability to function in society as a realistic thing. Like, realistically, like, here's what it's like for someone like that. And people acknowledge, they don't just like, oh, this guy's a big dummy, like it's a cartoon. It's like, oh, this guy has some weird real problem. Like, he doesn't know who he is. Like, in this show, he doesn't remember anything more than a few days ago. Anything prior to that is like hazy. Like, at some point he comments like he's known Arthur forever, even though he only met him like a week ago. The implication being he just doesn't remember a time before he met Arthur, because his memory doesn't go back that far. It's like, that's kind of intriguing. It's still funny. It's still, the stuff he says is still funny in that sort of humor, but at the same time, it's like, oh, that's interesting. It makes you think, and the silliness of it isn't as jarring because it's like, oh, there's a reason for this. Ditto, it's all the characters are like, Arthur's is mentally unwell, and he had a very traumatic childhood, and we see this. We see the traumatic event, and it's fucking traumatic. Believably so, despite all the silliness of it. The comic books superhero-ness of what we see. It's like, how this is how something even this ridiculous could have very real, a terrible consequence for a person or a child. And it's like, wow, that's still funny, but much darker and more adult and intriguing. It's just the it's like a juxtaposition of the goofiness of it with the realism of it. And I keep saying realism, and I want realistic consequences are different than realism. Like, it's not portrayed as this is in the real world at all. The humor is good because it's solid. It's continuous. It's not, here's a joke or a funny situation or scene, and let's pause for a way much too long for you to focus on it and laugh at it. They keep a pretty steady pace. So the funny parts to it keep going. It has a very good rhythm. What I really want to comment on is the second half, where if I liked 4, 5, 6, episodes 4 through 6, man, all 6 of the episodes for the second half of the season, episodes 7 through 12, the improvement continues. I'm getting this odd impression like Amazon Studios, or whomever this is, had very little faith in it. They're like, this is just an experiment. This is how we're doing things. If people want to do it, we'll try it, but we'll try it. We're not going to fully dive into this and invest in it. So the first few episodes are good, but not great. Then it gets better, and then this season, my suspicion is it got a lot of more attention. People are like, wow, this is really good, keep this up. And they're like, oh crap, we finally have some worthwhile content on our hands. Let's not fuck this up. And God, the last 6 episodes, these new 6 episodes are really, really quite good. I mean, there are parts of it that are kind of deep, they're touching, they're funny, they're interesting. I can't stress that last part enough. It's visually, weird stuff happens. We don't focus on it too much. You'll at most have a character go, that's really strange. And we move, and we go forward. We don't waste time trying to explain stuff we don't need to explain. Like, at one point there is a giant robot head that shows up. Just a defunct, empty robot head. That's weird, but we don't... Where does it come from? We don't know. We don't need to know. It's just like, look, superheroes exist. There's an abandoned robot head over here. The shit happens. Awesome. And that's what I love about the show. This is really... God, and that's not all. There's more to it. There's so much to talk about. That's why I want to talk about it. And not the other stuff I wanted to do this week. But let's keep going on this, because I want to talk about this some more. Another thing is, every single character is important. And every single character you see in the first 6 episodes this year, and those last 6 episodes, every one of them, everyone you see has an arc. Everyone. Absolutely everyone. Arthur's stepdad, Walter. Tinfoil Hat Kevin, Dot, his sister, who's all of these characters are fully realized. They all have an interesting backstory, hobbies, things they do, things they like to do. The villains have hobbies and stuff. I mean, we see that their interactions and through their dialogue that there's the implication of history, that it's not just these are some weirdos who popped on stage suddenly. There's the strong impression that they have a past, a history, that they did stuff prior to this. And that's really, that's great writing. very good writing. The acting is very good. The special effects, they have the budget they have. There are a couple moments where it's like, oh, this is okay. But it's good enough. It's whenever they are limited by special effects, they use them sparingly, only when they need to. Very efficient use of special effects. Like, we don't always have the effects we want to have, and at some point we have people jumping through the air and confronting a giant man. The giant man has a fucking arc. And a name, and brilliant. Everything's brilliant. So I cannot more fully recommend this show. It is definitely more adult oriented than any other iteration of the Tick. People say fuck an awful lot. We do see some naked man ass. There's little bits like that. Like, this is more of a PG rated show. And once again, I get the impression, weird aside, having rewatched this, I think they re-edited the first 6 episodes. I might be wrong. I don't think I am. I think they added, like, maybe over the course of 6 episodes, maybe 5 minutes of extra dialogue and footage. Like, not a lot. Just a little bit here and there, because I don't remember them swearing quite this much the first time I saw the show. Like, I think they tweaked it a little bit, tried to clean stuff up a little, tried to fix a scene or two here. And that's fine. It's not jarring. I just notice it because, like I said, I've been watching these episodes over and over and over again. It's a great show. It's worth rewatching. So I'm just going to end it there. I love this show, and I strongly recommend watching it. It's definitely the most interesting thing I've seen in a while, and that's saying a lot. We're in this crazy golden age of entertainment where there's amazing stuff I love and I can't watch it all because there just simply isn't time. Like, oh, that looks fantastic. That's an amazing thing I would love. Penny Dreadful is like Penny Dreadful while Westworld made precisely for me. That is, I'm perfectly coded for that. And I just don't have time for that. I don't have time for this brilliant, awesome, groundbreaking stuff I am just ready to obsess over. I've got other entertainment that's similarly awesome to obsess over. So take the time to watch the show. It's very good. I recommend seeing it. The odds you're going to see this and not like it are extraordinarily slim. There's something for everyone, because this is very touching and human in places that gives it more gravity than a silly superhero costume, a live-action silly super comedy parody should have, and yet it does. Like, there are a few moments, especially in the last episode, where I actually got a little choked up. I mean, it's good. Go see it. That's all. I'm out.